Tell me a bit more about sort of summary of your professional experience.
Well, I never thought I'd end up here. That's the first thing I would say, and probably people who look at my CV would be surprised that I ended up here as well. Ended up sounds very final, doesn't it? I'm only 52. I'm not finished yet, but I am not a traditional kind of career ladder person at all. I've taken things that I thought would be helpful and enjoyable with companies who've promised to train me. Has been a real theme of mine throughout my career. And actually, I wasn't enormously gifted at school. You know, I wasn't a straight A student. I dropped out of college after a year because it was really boring. And I was somebody who liked to get my hands on things. I was actually a show jumper at that time. So I was very, very good at that. And it was very different than going to work with people. So I've been everything. I've been a PA, not a proper PA, just a temp PA. I worked for Kelly Girls, who were a good agency, and I worked in different companies, and then they seconded me to different places, and finally one of them offered me a job as a trainer. So I said, yes, if you train me to train people well, because I'd helped him when somebody was off sick and essentially started admin training. And then it kind of steamrolled a bit. I started doing more training programs, and then I got a job which was about getting the money for the training programs. And that was really exciting, but a lot of admin, dealing with the European Union, a lot of patience, had to learn about that as well. And then it went on. I landed a magical job as the ops manager for Scotland in something called the National Lottery Communities Board at the time, which was giving away funding to good causes. And why wouldn't you want to do that? 15 years later, having been in various incarnations through a merger, two mergers actually, taken on all sorts of different roles, operations, corporate services, deputy chief exec, I realised it was 15 years I'd worked there, and that if I didn't move, I could possibly die there. I literally thought I could be here until I am at the end of days. And I realised I was in something called my comfort zone. So I decided I didn't like that. And literally in that board meeting, I decided I'm getting out. And I applied for, and I kid you know, a job that I'd never done, in a sector I'd never worked in a place I'd never been to. Because I had this fear that I was only doing good stuff because of my teams and that I had really contributed nothing. And it just gripped me. So I thought I better find out. So off I went to a really, really tough job where I did survive and thrive. And that really put the kind of fire under my belly. I moved a few years later to run the disclosure and barring service, which was a whole new sector again, safeguarding. Very important job. Amazing teams looking to look after and protect our most vulnerable people, hospitals, schools, play areas, you name it, we covered it. And then this ridiculous job came up to lead the Office for Nuclear Regulation as chief exec. I thought the headhunter had made a mistake. So I told them I didn't know anyone. And they called back the week after to say, we meant you. We're not looking for a nuclear person, we're looking for a leader. There's a lot to be done there. So I did that. And 6 years later, I left, and I now help people through executive coaching. I have 4 non-exec roles, which I love. Honestly, anybody listening to this, if you want to think about how to spread your wings and find out about more businesses and still add value, really consider a non-exec or a trustee role. Because along the way, I've had voluntary roles as well, which have always been very enriching, whether it's CareTech Foundation, an organisation that looks after carers, or whether it was Women in Nuclear, an organisation completely dedicated to improving gender diversity across the nuclear sector, across the globe. These are amazing things we can get involved in. So is it a regular traditional career? No. Do I know what's going to happen next? Absolutely no idea. And I've decided that's really cool and I'm okay with it. So please don't panic if you're one of the folk wondering what you're going to do when you grow up. It doesn't matter. Just be useful. Yeah. I think more and more that's what suits people generally. This expectation that you have to decide and then stick to things. And so for some people, that's it. I want to be an airline pilot. Well, do you know what? Get on with it. I would love to see airline pilots who want to be airline pilots. I fly. I want them to care. I want to be safe. But if you don't really know, or at least if you're open to change, I think then more things may arise that you never even knew about. I certainly didn't know there was such a thing as a nuclear regulator. when I was 16, leaving school. And I didn't really know there was such a thing as a chief exec that would look like me. The few I'd seen on telly all looked really different. So there's also this thing about career varieties opening up through technology and through innovation, but I think expectations and norms changing that allow us to change the world one career decision at a time. And I love what you'd say there about mentoring, especially young women, often with very few life chances. Similarly, in my voluntary sector days, that was a lot of what I was involved in, and it was quite a shock, probably around my early 20s, to realise how little many people had compared to what I would call a very loving and privileged upbringing. So, I think there is something about giving back through careers in many different ways, but to be able to have more structure now, to be able to show girls and young women, for example, in STEM subjects where they are woefully underrepresented in the UK especially, to show them that there are really fun, interesting, exciting, clever people there. Oh, by the way, some of them are women in these subjects, that we can reach for things that we can imagine. It's harder for most of us to reach for things we can't.
I was really struck by what you said around, I didn't know that there were these careers, and for people who look like me, as in, a woman. And I'm curious about hearing about some of your experiences, as a leader in a range of different sectors, and get someone who's worked at a really senior level. What have you experienced personally or witnessed in some of your colleagues have been some of the major challenges that women leaders face as they progress into senior leadership?
I think it's changed, and that may be because my perception and experience and view of the world has changed. I certainly see things differently in my 50s now than I did in my 20s, but I do also think the environment's changed. So let's look at what's happening around us. There are now definitely more opportunities for women than ever before. That's a good thing in my view. But there's still a lot of barriers. Childcare tends to fall on women. Whether you think that's right or wrong, that's the deal. And the geopolitics of childcare is not really much better, frankly, now than it was in my 20s. So, I think we've got push and pulls, but what we have are women who are driven to do more. We have women who have families who are more supportive of careers. We have women who themselves are tackling subjects that were in some years taboo. And my personal experience is this. When I used to watch TV and see women bosses on, they were universally in stiletto heels, large shoulder pads, and not very nice people. We saw caricatures of leadership, which were often cruel, actually, and kind of cutthroat to get ahead, because that's what women needed to be like on the telly. Well, thank goodness real women aren't actually like that most of the time, but I have come across a few and not known how to deal with it. So as I see now the environment where there's much more support, there is greater opportunity to talk about what women need to get ahead. We have a greater understanding that the genders actually view the world differently. We have hugely different hormones and chemical mixes in our bodies, and that is important to understand. It's a while since I've been asked automatically to make the tea, but actually I do often offer. I don't necessarily take that an insult if there's an equal view around the room. But let me tell you about a story about training. I was fortunate enough to be sent to Henley Management School in my mid-20s, and it was the first really big course I'd been on. It was very expensive. I had to fly from Glasgow to London and get to Henley. This was a huge deal for me. And I was sort of worrying myself sick, as I often do about these things before I go. And I got a phone call. And the phone call was from the programme to ask me, or to offer me the chance to not come, because I was the only woman on this programme and just about the only one under 40. And as I said, I was in my 20s at the time. And that was the first time it hit me that I was going to be a bit of an outlier in some ways going forward. That was the first time. So of course I said, oh, there's some bloody coming along. Yes, I'll be there. And I spent the first couple of days crying a lot, which I don't mind admitting, because people were not being mean to me, but they were super dismissive. And what I noticed was that this was my peers, that the organisers weren't really stepping in to do anything about it. So even though a couple of them spoke to me and said, I'm sorry about that, they didn't deal with it in the moment. And for me, that was a really important lesson. When we see somebody being treated in a way that isn't appropriate and isn't in their best interests, then in a position of power or as a peer, we have an equal responsibility to step in. And I thank the gentlemen on that programme, because they put a bit of a fire in my belly, and they really made me think long and hard about what it's like to be in groups with others and really be much more inclusive. And I think from then, that sort of started me noticing, as you look around a room, what's going on, and being much more likely to step in to address something than perhaps most people are.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we hear more and more now the need for organizations to not just think about diversity, but to create inclusive leadership cultures. I'm wondering, from your experience and the gaps that you still see, what's the shift that's really needed by actually leaders in organizations to create more inclusive cultures?
I think that's one of the most important questions of our time as leaders, right now, right this minute, because it's all about getting the best from everybody on a team. Too long, I think, equality has been seen about minorities. It's not, it's about the majorities working differently to enable the minorities to contribute better. And I think that goes across all of the differences between us, whether it's the obvious ones like gender, race, sexuality, whether it's like other things that are observable but less clear, like introversion and extroversion, whether it's about background. And I think there's only one thing that we need to really get better at as leaders, and it's to have many more meaningful conversations. It's to be able to get off the task and look at the dynamics and have a complete comfort in addressing the dynamics at least as often as we address the task. If we have leaders who are able and willing to do that and capable of learning the skill set to really stop asserting views, stop telling everybody what's good for them, and actually asking questions and listening and inquiring what it would take for me to help you perform even better, then we start to have more interesting debates. Then we start to have groups that actually are more thoughtful about each other. But the number one other thing is to address it when it's wrong. You know, be the person in the room who says, Sandra hasn't actually had a minute to answer questions because you lot keep speaking over her and she's got her hand up. Whether it's to say, you know, I noticed, Julia, that you've not been, saying much in this meeting. Is there something you think would be helpful for us to hear? It's about saying to people that the balance of contribution needs to be thought about, not just emerge in organisations. And that number one, having a really good, many more meaningful conversations. But then wouldn't the world be better if everybody did that?
I think that's the thing. I completely agree with you. I'm wondering, so that's your kind of call to action, really. That sounds like a very powerful, this is the clarion call to action for people in organizations who hold more of a senior and influential position. What would your advice be to younger women who are kind of progressing in their leadership journey and facing some of the challenges that you have faced, maybe some new ones? What would your words of advice be for them?
I think having people around you who can mentor you is important. We see that in all of the research. Mentoring is one of the top 3 activities that will make a difference for minorities, period. So find a mentor, even if they don't have a capital M. Get somebody with a little m that will mentor you, that you can talk to. Especially, I think, for people who maybe haven't had as supportive either friendships, relationships, parental relationships, really find somebody in work who's prepared to be with you. The second thing is to put your hand up. So if you notice there's something you could be doing, don't wait to be found. Go and put your hand up, tell somebody that you're there. They may not be editing you out on purpose, they just haven't noticed that you're interested. So, I think there's a combination there of not making assumptions about what other people are thinking, I'm going to check it out by saying, I was wondering if, I noticed that. How would you feel about? What would it take for me to? Just pose a really good question to somebody to see how you can get involved in things. And I think the third thing for me would be resilience. Everybody gets knocks. I'm a terrible, chronic overthinker. I'm not proud of it. I should have knocked it on the head by now, but it's unlikely to change out of my DNA. However, I have to rationalize that and realize that not everything is about me or a mistake, but I take terrible responsibility for things at times. And I know a lot of women who do the same thing. We see a slightly cross look in a meeting and we imagine that we made a terrible faux pas. And if we just ask, we find out it was nothing to do with us. It was wind or something had happened on the phone that we don't know about. So again, be prepared to get back up after a knock. Be prepared to have knocks. They're good. You're not stretching yourself if you're not getting knocked now and again. But don't let yourself be the one who is the biggest knocker. Don't let your chronic overthinking and, strive for perfection get in the way of you being amazing. You don't need to be perfect. You need to care. You need to want to make a difference. And who doesn't fall over when we try new stuff? Don't worry about it. Get your bandage on and get back out.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think I really take that message to heart. And I was coaching someone this morning who's a senior woman leader from one of the big housing providers, and it was around exactly that theme, sort of allowing yourself not to be perfect, because it gets in the way of trying and actually achieving more than you thought was possible. So this year, the theme for International Women's Day is to embrace equity, and really making this distinction between, striving for equality, which we know we don't have, but actually recognizing that equality is not enough. And I wonder if you could talk into what that means for you, thinking about women in leadership. What is important for you about this idea of equity?
What we need to be doing is thinking about people. And I believe equity requires much more consideration about the plight of others, about their circumstance, and much more tailoring. Now, the challenge, of course, if you're a leader in a biggish company, is how do you tailor to 12,000 people to 20,000 people? Well, you don't have to do that as the leader. What you have to do is create a climate where all of your leaders do that for you. And that is absolutely where the role of leadership fits in for me. We need to be training people not to be great leaders in their own right, but to be great leaders of other leaders, not followers. And I think for me, it generally is this simple. For emphasising the skills in leadership, which are about empathy and compassion and inclusion, we will get to equity. And you know what? Why wouldn't we? Even if this world was totally equal, even if there was equity, why wouldn't we still want bosses who were right, bottom line driven, logical thinkers, strategic mathematicians, and compassionate, and compassionate leaders who care about their people? That's what I think the answer is.
Thank you. Adrienne, I think that is the perfect place to close, but I want to just offer, in case you feel there's anything else that you say, so the final, if people listening in to any of what you said, if there was one thing that you would really hope that they took away as an action, a call to action, what would it be for them?
If you see something you want, go and get it. If you see something somebody else wants that you can give to them, help them reach it. And if there's something that you think you want but you don't know, don't be afraid to go try it.
Okay. Adrienne, thank you so much. I mean, I can't say thank you enough. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you and to feel your energy.